This is Stay Paid, the marketing podcast that gives listeners a competitive edge to stay motivated, find inspiration, and discover proven real-world tactics from some of the best marketers across the nation.
Welcome to another Silver Dollar episode of Stay Paid. My name is Joshua Stike.
And I'm Luke Akery.
Jerry Seinfeld famously observed that according to studies, people's number one fear is public speaking. Number two is death. This means to the average person, if you go to a funeral, you're better off in the casket than doing the eulogy, which is funny. I mean,
I could see that.
It is funny, but it's true in a lot of cases. And you've been doing a ton of public speaking lately. You've been kind of going on the road. How many times have you been on the road
doing
this
a lot
year
of
already?
Virtual speaking too, but yeah, I've been on the road a lot. But yeah,
you've been doing webinars and virtual speaking.
Virtual speaking is not quite the same. It's a different art form.
What impresses me, you do these Motivation Mondays in the insurance syndicate, which is Joe Campert's group, right? We've had him on the podcast. And I think there was one morning, actually, we were traveling together. You're like, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. You got on live in the back car or the back seat of the car.
We had come back from the Super Bowl is what it was. We were all night, like red-eye flight back from the Super Bowl.
And I just go, holy crap, how does he do it? Yeah. But this is how we're going to go over these three super important tips that you've identified for getting better at public speaking.
Yeah, I've done a lot of public speaking in my time. I'm decent at it, according to most people. And I think it is an art form that if you want to move up in your career, you need to be very good at, right? Because whether you work for a company right now, you are going to have a chance to public speak. Even if it's in a meeting, you're going to be speaking in front of people. And influence is one of the key traits of a great entrepreneur. And public speaking is about influence. How do you engage the audience? How do you bring them in? And you have an opportunity to actually become really good at public speaking, but you have to apply yourself. Most people think of public speaking kind of like sales. Oh, I don't have the gift of sales. Right. Now, BS. Yeah. You can apply yourself and become a great public speaker. Case in point, you. Josh, I remember when I first, was working with you, I don't know, years ago, right? And it's like your public speaking wasn't bad, but there was nothing there. Your public speaking today is, I just didn't want to make you feel bad, but your public speaking today is phenomenal. And I think I know why, but it's just case in point.
Looking over these and kind of and doing a little bit of research on the side as well. I'm like, okay, a lot of this stuff I can relate to. You do have the natural talent, like you're naturally talented, but you still do all of these things. And the first thing and most important thing maybe is preparation.
Yeah, preparation on what you are actually going to speak on. And like I'm a musician, I've given this analogy before on the podcast. If you actually practice the song on piano, when you get up on stage, your heart will be racing, your palms might be sweaty because you get nervous. Everybody does, myself included. But your muscle memory will take over. Yeah. If you've prepared, we all know this to be true. You need to prepare your thoughts beforehand. And the only way to have great preparation is to actually have great knowledge authority or authority on your subject matter. Grant Cardone calls it altitude. You have to get altitude on your subject matter so you can speak on it with confidence. Yeah. Elon Musk, apply this to interviewing, right? Which is a form of public speaking, even though it's one-on-one, but it could be one-to-many. Elon Musk literally asked people, tell me the toughest problem you've solved. Mm-hmm. And he looks for altitude on a subject matter. Mm-hmm. What he looks for is, does that person stay surface level or do they go deep into the details? The reason why I'm really harping on this is because if you have authority on your subject matter and you prepare your thoughts in advance, you can speak with conviction and confidence. And that is one of the main ways you influence people from stage. So think of your listening presentation. Do you know the market numbers? Do you know what has sold? Not only what has sold in the past couple of months, what has sold in the past year, the past 2 years? Do you know the surrounding area when it comes to the parks and the grocery stores and the lifestyle? Like, have you done your preparation to know this market so when you get in that listing presentation, you can speak with authority and confidence because not only did you prepare your thoughts in practice, but you have a deep understanding of what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I think both things, both in terms of preparing your thoughts and knowing your numbers, but also like if you're the type of person like me who literally needs to verbally practice. Mm-hmm. So even on the way over here, we've recorded 460 plus podcasts. This is our 461st podcast. I've been on 456 of them. So
really?
I came in like episode 5. Yeah. But literally on the drive over, I had my Evernote file open and was kind of just glancing at it. And practicing what we're going to talk about, especially on this next one, because we're going to go over Facebook lead generation, and that's sort of where I have all the information, I have all the knowledge, but actually being able to convey that and communicate it is where I have to actually sit down and
well, I spoke on a insurance webinar today to a couple insurance agencies. And before I did the webinar, even though I know the subject matter, I was going through in my head, what is my opening going to be? How am I going to transition?
So you do it all in your head?
All in my head right there. What is my opening going to be? I share it. Sometimes I've gotten to the point now where I don't have to speak it out loud as much.
Right.
I used to, so I teach at my church, when I was teaching at my church, I used to recite the whole lesson.
Okay.
Because I wanted to get the timing right. I wanted to make sure that I had the knowledge and all that stuff. Now I don't have to recite it out as much because I've done it more and more, and that applies to like the podcast. It applies to me speaking on virtual stages or on real stages. But I play the scenario all out in my head. And here's
what you're going through. You were starting to go through these elements, the elements of a speech. Right, so there's 5 elements in a speech.
Oh, this is good. I don't know this.
Your attention statement.
Okay.
Right, so saying something that's going to
your
capture
power
people's attention.
Statement. Yep.
Your introduction, right, who you are, why you're here. Then you have your body. That's where the majority of your content's going to be, obviously. Your conclusion, and then your residual message, the thing that you want to say that kind of sums everything up that people will take away with them because they're going to take away that last thing that they heard.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And one of the things that I'll tell you about preparation, why it's so critical to public speaking or doing your listening presentation and knowing what you're going to say, is because the brain, what happens to the brain is when we get our heartbeat up and when our palms are sweating, everything, it's very hard to think on the spot because you're very much in the zone and you lose your train of thought.
Your fight or flight kicks in, literally. And that's where your brain is
if
centered.
If you have your first paragraph memorized what you're going to say, guess what the whole rest of the speech becomes? And this is why people say use bullet points or index cards sometimes, is because you want to give your brain the ability to be ahead of itself. You're speaking and you're actually almost outside of your body right now because you know exactly what you're going to say, so you're actually able to think about the next thought. At least this is how I function.
No, you're hitting on a really important point. Practice your transitions.
Yes.
If you can capture and latch onto those transitions, you won't forget what your next point will be because you'll naturally flow into it.
And that is the key to preparation when
we do it every webinar.
When
we sit down and do our webinar, we say, what's our transition going to be either from this slide to the next slide because of all the information we're giving or between each other.
Yep, 100%.
All right. Number 2, use stories and examples. People remember stories and examples much better than statistics or facts.
Yeah, I still fail at this often. I constantly find myself saying to people, did you know that 50% of all leads are wasted? Or did you know that 91% of people say they will refer you, but only 11% of salespeople ask? Those stats are good, but what I've realized over the years is it really doesn't hook people by like saying something like that versus saying, like, we see this on our TikToks. Like, did you hear the story of Payless Shoes? Right? Just that line of, did you hear the story of Payless Shoes? Or did you know that Red Bull grew their company by actually throwing their cans in the trash? Like, those type of openings are way better to hook people and way better for people to remember. So, like, I know, like I mentioned teaching at my church, like I oftentimes will be like, I'll come out there and I'll teach and I'll go, the year was 1969. And then I'll go into a story. Because that immediately, what you see happens to the audience is they lean in and they're like, okay, well, what is he talking about here? Versus the normal openings that people do is kind of that fidgeting opening, that him and hawing opening, that thank you so much, for being here, making a joke, self-deprecating on themselves. Versus like, and I'm trying to get better at this. I'm not the greatest at this. Owning the stage. Owning your confidence, going out there and literally letting there be a little silence.
Everybody wants you to succeed.
Yes. Also,
in the audience, nobody wants you to fail or to be embarrassed in front of them. Like, everyone wants you to succeed as well. That can help give you the confidence. Also.
So when you open, and this is specifically to more speaking or presenting, it's like, go out there, pause for a second.
Yeah.
Look at the audience. They're looking at you. You're looking at them. And then you open. Versus the normal is they intro you and you immediately start talking and saying, you start fumbling him and out because it shows mastery and control.
Yeah.
And I am really bad at this when it comes to body language. The same for your body language when you are opening up. It's like, try not to be all over the place, like with your hands or with your movement.
What you were doing just now with your fingers, like that's what Renee Rodriguez talks about.
Oh, that is a great
the
podcast.
Power stance,
Go
where you
look
have
at.
kind of your feet wide, your hands in a what am I doing? My fingers are touching each other, sort of pointing out from my body, and it's about heart high. And he talks about how that not only is a power stance, but also an influence stance. Versus if you're wringing your hands, that's a sign that you're nervous. If you're touching your face, that's a sign of nerves.
It makes sense because you want to feel confident, or I shouldn't even say confident. You want the audience to feel like secure, like comfortable. And when you're not comfortable, they're not comfortable.
Yeah, right.
And so they're more focused on what's going to happen. I hope this guy doesn't mess up versus the content of what you're trying to present. And if you're trying to sell something, persuade people, influence people, you've lost them because they're more caring about you being nervous or you fumbling or is this guy going to mess up than they are caring actually about the content that you're delivering. Yeah. So sharing stories, people remember naturally. It hooks them, it engages them. I used to open up. I still do sometimes. I'll walk out on stage and go and look at everybody and have that little sign and go, there's a huge problem. And then just pause. There's a huge problem. And I picked this up from Donald Miller. There's a huge problem in your business. And if you fix this problem, not only can you double the revenue of your business, but more importantly, you can get yourself off the hamster wheel that so many of you feel like you're on today, constantly chasing the next thing and never growing a business that scales. And people want to know, well, what's the huge problem? Yeah. Right. So that's kind of the
think of these 4 P's because you're kind of hitting on them in your example there. You mentioned one of them already, which is pauses. But the 4 P's to effective and compelling oral delivery: projection, right? So what are you doing with your voice? When are you getting louder? When are you getting quieter? Pace. How fast are you speaking versus you slowed down a couple times there? Your pitch, right? So the intonation of your voice, and then pauses.
Love that.
Is the 4 P's. Yep. So keep that in mind.
I constantly have to tell myself, the timing in your brain is way different than the timing to the audience. So you think it's an awkward silence. The audience does not perceive it as an awkward silence. So hold your tongue. Like, don't say the next thing. I constantly have to tell myself that.
All right, and number 3 is to make sure that you're engaging your audience. So this is just don't talk at them, right? Be interactive with them. Make your presentations interactive.
Don't overuse calling people's names. But if you're presenting virtually or you know the people that you're presenting to, engage them by using them in examples. I spoke to the insurance agency today, and I used them as examples. So when I talked about frequency to your clients and what you should do in picking up the phone and calling them, I don't just say, you should call your clients and this is what you should say. I say, Tina, if you were one of my clients, and you were one of my most valued people, I pull her in. She immediately, you see it on everybody's faces. She pops up and she's listening because I called her name, the most valuable thing people hear or whatever. Yeah. And I constantly use people in examples. And a lot of times I'll use them almost with each other. So if you're on stage, you can go, hey, you, what's your name, sir?
Yep.
And they go, oh, my name's Rodney. Hey, Rodney. If Rodney, you were actually going to reach out to, what's your name over here, sir? Bob. Rodney, if you were going to reach out to Bob over here, like you're engaging them by pulling them in, by making them part of the example that you're giving. And then oftentimes we can ask rhetorical-based questions that get people engaged with hand raising and involved in the actual like storytelling that you're doing. So I'll often ask a rhetorical question of, I know this is kind of rhetorical, but how many of you believe you're leaving referrals on the table, that you are not getting enough referrals right now from your business? You know it to be true. Raise your hand just so we can see, hey, man, I'm not the only one. I just want people to get engaged so they can then go, okay, he's talking referrals, and then I can go down my stream.
Yeah. Think about impact per minute. I saw was one of the key sort of things. You want to make sure that you're making an impact, whether that's an engagement with the audience or something that's making them laugh. Comedians, they have kind of this rule of laughs per minute. It's like 3 to 4 laughs per minute. That's like a laugh every 15 to 20 seconds. And you want to be doing the same thing with your audience. 7 elements in the communication process that apply to speech, because you're hitting on some of them here. The speaker, right? The person actually giving the speech. The listeners, this is your audience, the message, what you're saying, the channel, whether you're doing it live or virtual, interference, This is kind of in terms of the interactivity people are they get on their phones, right? You call someone's name while they're sitting there on their phone, pop, their head's going to come up. Feedback, which is what you're going to get whenever you do engage them, and then the situation, just knowing the context around the speech.
I'll give you an example. Ed Milet, we were at 8%, and I think he does this as a tactic, to be honest, because he did it at a Keller Williams event too. I watched him speak, and I was like, oh, this is a tactic you use. He goes into his speaking. He's a few minutes in, and he points out people in the audience that are not paying attention.
Does he?
And he literally at 8% goes, hey, you on your phone. It's super disrespectful right now that you're looking at your phone. And if I had the chance to listen to somebody who went from broke to being worth $400 million, I might take the second to actually listen to them. Now, you might receive that in the moment like I did, like, oh, that's really almost in a way arrogant. That's kind of, that's rude a little bit. But you know why it's so powerful? Because he commanded the attention. He didn't flinch and become nervous and he delivered on the value prop that he wanted to give to people. And then the gold that he gave to them was worth him shaking them and waking them up. And that is why it is insanely powerful. And he's willing to take that risk to be perceived in the moment as rude, or perceived in the moment as even egotistical, perceived in the moment as going like, wow, this guy really cares that people listen to him, because he knows this is important, what I'm trying to share with you, and I need your full attention. And when you're talking about the interference and stuff like that, I'm like, wow, that was such a powerful thing. And it's a tactic because he did it at 8% Nation. And then I'm watching this Keller Williams speech that he did, and he did it there. And I'm like,
okay, so
I'm like, he does this as a tactic. And I was like, that's really good.
You look around, it's like, no one was even on their phones, Ed. What are you talking about? All right, there you go. Hopefully that will help you out in your next public speaking, whether you're speaking in front of a large group or virtual, doing a seminar, at a listing presentation, working with clients, whatever it might be. Hopefully some of those tips will help you out. Thank you so much for listening. You can head over to staypaidpodcast.com for the show notes and the video of this episode. And if you like this episode and want to show your support, go on to Apple Podcast, drop us a 5-star review, and leave us a rating or a comment. We'll read it here on the show. And the best way to show your support is to simply share this episode with a friend or on social media. Do you guys want to hear, and speaking of interaction, I'm going to need some interaction going with you guys. So,
yes.
Do you want to hear a great Batman impression?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, here goes. No, not the kryptonite.
That was it. Nice.
I don't get it.
Wait.
That wasn't Batman?
That was
That's Superman.
Oh, thank you for the compliment. If you want to get a hold of me or Luke, you can email us at podcast@remindermedia.com. Sometimes I just got to skirt right by.
Oh, man. That was actually pretty good.
Right?
That
took me a second. I was like, wait a minute. Kryptonite? Okay, yeah.
All right, you can find us, you can email us podcast@remindermedia.com, or you can find us on Instagram. We're at Stay Paid Podcast. For this episode of Stay Paid, I'm Joshua Stike.
Guys, I'm Luke Akery. The action item I want you to do is I want you to record your presentation. So if you're a real estate agent, you're doing listening presentations. If you're a financial advisor, you might be doing seminars. I mean, the same applies across the board. Maybe all of you are doing seminars. I want you to record your presentation and watch it back. And I want you to think about your opening and how you're actually using stories to engage people and bring them in, and how you're engaging with the audience in your presentation. It is insanely powerful to watch visually and hear yourself give your presentation. So if you haven't recorded yourself giving the presentation, that is your action item this week. Remember, the difference between top producers and mediocre producers in every single business is top producers take action. Take action on that today.